If we keep misbehaving ourselves, ignoring what we've been ignoring, doing what we've been doing to the environment, for instance, here's what we're liable to wind up with.
Is it possible that one of our greatest science fiction writers vividly described the world we live in today, but she did it more than 30 years ago? How did she predict the future? Or are we just bringing to life several parts of her darkest imagination? Octavia Butler, the visionary author of Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, painted a chilling dystopian future marred by climate disasters, political corruption, extreme wealth inequality, and corporate control of our lives. That future, it looks a lot like our present. With Donald Trump back in the White House in 2025 and his unchecked power, we have to ask, how close are we to Butler's dystopia? And more importantly, what guidance would she offer us today? Octavia Estelle Butler was no ordinary writer. Born in 1947, she became one of the most influential voices in speculative fiction, winning a MacArthur Genius Grant and multiple Hugo and Nebula Awards. But Butler wasn't just telling stories. She was warning us about the future if we weren't careful about how we treated the planet and each other. Through books like Kindred, Dawn, and the Parable series, she tackled racism, authoritarianism, environmental collapse, and human survival in the face of crisis. Her work was Afrofuturism before the term became mainstream, and she believed power structures were fragile things that could be broken or reshaped. Here we're focusing on Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, where she laid out a vision of America that is disturbingly familiar today. Parable of the Sower, published in 1993, takes place in the 2020s, in a world where America has descended into chaos. Climate change has made water a luxury. The middle class has collapsed. A populist president named Andrew Steele Jarrett rises to power with the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Sound familiar?
I was saved by God to make America great again.
The novel follows Lauren Olamina, a teenage girl with a vision for a new way of life, one she calls Earthseed. Through her eyes, Butler shows us what happens when people ignore warning signs and let corruption, greed, and disaster spiral out of control. But Butler didn't stop there. In the 1998 follow-up Parable of the Talents, she showed us what happens after a leader like Jarrett takes power. Religious extremism, violent nationalism, and a dismantling of civil rights turn America into something unrecognizable. Now here's the thing we really want to point out. Butler didn't just write science fiction, she wrote survival guides. So let's break down 4 key themes from Butler's Parable series and compare them to our world today. More importantly, let's ask, if Butler were here, what would she tell us to do to survive? In Parable of the Sower, climate disasters reshape society. Water is scarce. Food prices soar. People migrate in desperation. Butler writes, drought, war, and economic crises just added to the problems, cutting into food production, driving more people out of their jobs and homes. And here in 2025, Trump's administration just gutted environmental protections under the banner of cutting costs and boosting jobs. Climate disasters are getting worse, but people in leadership are pretending everything's fine. In 2024 alone, wildfires tore through California, hurricanes battered the East Coast, and Texas suffered its worst drought in a century. Yet, instead of addressing these crises, Trump has rolled back emissions regulations and prioritized fossil fuel expansion. What would Butler say? She'd say, prepare, build resilience, find ways to protect your community. Because waiting for the government to fix this, that's a losing game.
The society that I portray in these 2 books is pretty much broken. There are a lot of reasons for this. drugs, of course, and deterioration of public education, the environmental situation. Global warming is practically a character in Parable of the Sower. Lots of other things that have simply, they're problems now. They become disasters because they're not attended to.
In Butler's world, the middle class is gone. People live behind walls or out on the streets. Work is unstable. The wealthy hoard resources while everyone else fights to survive. She explains, people get so desperate, so poor that they'll work for food, water, a roof, or even just the illusion of security. And today, Trump's tax policies are widening the wealth gap. The rich are richer, the poor are struggling more than ever, and homelessness is at crisis levels. The cost of living has skyrocketed, with rent in major cities rising over 30% since 2023. Meanwhile, major corporations continue union-busting efforts, and social safety nets are being dismantled. What would Butler say? She'd tell us we are on our own. Mutual aid, community resilience, and radical self-sufficiency are the only ways to survive a system designed to abandon us. In Butler's novel, a right-wing demagogue takes power, using religion and nationalism to justify authoritarianism. A politician can win office by playing on people's fears and pretending to be strong while promising to restore a mythical past. This is where Parable of the Talents becomes even more relevant. In the sequel, President Jarrett rises to power by using Christian fundamentalism as a weapon. His supporters kidnap and re-educate people who don't conform. Freedom of speech disappears. The government turns a blind eye to racial violence and oppression. Trump's 2025 administration has shut down government agencies, gutted regulations, and consolidated power in ways we never imagined. His re-election came with renewed attacks on the press, voting rights, and free speech. Butler warned us of the dangers of a society willing to trade democracy for the illusion of strength. So what would Butler say about this? She'd remind us, democracy is fragile. If we don't actively defend it, it will disappear. Silence is complicity. In Parable of the Talents, Butler shows us a world where religious extremism is used to justify cruelty. Non-believers are persecuted, dissent is crushed, and those in power claim their brutality is God's will. She writes, slavery is back. By another name, but it's back.
Religion might be an answer as well as, in some cases, a problem. And in, for instance, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, it's both. So I have people who are bringing America to a kind of fascism because their religion is the only one they're willing to tolerate. On the other hand, I have people who are saying, well, here is another religion, and here are some verses that can help us think in a different way, and here is a destination that isn't something that we have to wait for after we die.
And today, the fusion of politics and religion in the U.S. is stronger than ever. Christian nationalism has influenced Supreme Court rulings, LGBTQ+ rights are under attack, and reproductive freedoms have been stripped away in multiple states. Trump's alignment with far-right religious groups mirrors Butler's warnings about how faith can be weaponized to control people.
President Trump is the man that will bring righteousness, the rule of law, and the Judeo-Christian values to our civilization.
What would Butler say? She'd warn us. Religious extremism thrives in times of fear. The only way to fight it is with truth, resistance, and unwavering defiance. Octavia Butler didn't just write about the future, she saw where we were headed. Her books are cautionary tales, but they are also survival guides. They tell us that change is inevitable, that adaptation is necessary, and that if we don't shape the future, someone else will. So sure, we can ask if Butler predicted current events, but our follow-up question must be, what did she want us to do about it? Because now is the time to listen and act.
And keep in mind, these were written early in the 90s, but I think they apply forever, actually. This first one, I have a character in the books who is, someone who is taking the country fascist and who manages to get elected president, and who oddly enough comes from Texas. And here is one of the things that my character is inspired to write about this sort of situation. She says, "Choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. To be led by a coward is to be controlled by all that the coward fears. To be led by a fool is to be led by the opportunists who control the fool. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. To be led by a liar is to ask to be lied to. To be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery."
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next installment of Ancestors Speak. And let's keep the conversation going. What do you think Octavia Butler would say about the world today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.